The Origins of the Second World War. A.J.P. Taylor's book, The Origins of the Second World War, challenges the conventional wisdom that Hitler was the main cause of World War II. Giving the blame to Hitler is a convenient view, says Taylor, since it lessens the guilt of others, particularly the Germans. If Hitler is to blame, then the German people are simply victims of his tyranny and aggressive nature. So first, let's discuss how Hitler could have been seen as the main cause of World War II. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933 by the most legitimate means. His Nazi Party won a majority in the parliamentary election. The aging Field Marshal, Paul von Hindenburg, had no choice but to allow Hitler, at age 43, to form a new government, marking the end of the Weimar Republic, the temporary democratic government set up by the Allied powers at the end of World War I. Thus was the beginning of the Third Reich, German kingdom, that, according to Hitler, would last 1,000 years. From that moment, Germany began its descent into hell. Hitler ordered his men to secretly burn down the Reichstag, the German parliament building, in order to create a crisis. He intended to blame it on the communists and gave the parliament an excuse for giving him emergency powers. As fate would have it, a mentally ill Dutch communist was setting fires on the same night and became a convenient scapegoat for Hitler. Soon, the first concentration camps were established for members of opposition parties. Hitler also had key members of the military assassinated when he had doubts about their loyalty to him. Fear descended on the country and squeezed it like a vice. Great writers, musicians, and painters went into exile in France, and many Jews with foresight emigrated toward Palestine. The air of Hitler's Germany was becoming more and more suffocating. Those who preferred to wait, thinking that the Nazi regime would not last, would regret it later when it was too late. The fact is that Hitler was beloved by many of his people. Ordinary Germans pledged to him an affection, a tenderness, and loyalty that bordered on the irrational. It was idolatry on a national scale. One had to see the crowds who acclaimed him and the women who were attracted to him. The young who were in his presence went into ecstasy. Did they not see the hateful mask that covered his face? Could they not sense the tragedy that he bore within himself? We think we know everything about the forces that created this monster. His unhappy childhood, his impoverished, frustrated youth, his artistic disappointments, his physical defect, the gassing he received during World War I, his taste for large ceremonies and spectacle, his constant disdain for leaders in high places, his relationship with Eva Braun, who adored him, a fascination with death and the glory of war, his belief that the strong man survives and the weak can be manipulated with fear, greed, and lust, his endless hatred of the Jews whose survival enraged him. Yet he remains a mystery to us. We wonder, how could a third-rate artist, an unstable paranoid, a murderous, fanatical dictator come to power through legal means in one of the most cultured, educated, advanced Christian nations in the world? It has been stated that Germany was ripe for a dictator during the years prior to 1933. The German people were suffering the humiliating defeat of World War I and severe economic depression. The leaders of the Weimar Republic were weak and ineffective. They could do nothing to stop Hitler's rise to power. Germans who did not have a job saw hope in Hitler. They were ready to get angry, get racist, get nationalistic, get whatever was rightfully theirs. Some would say later that they had been tricked into following Hitler. The truth is that psychologically and emotionally, Hitler fulfilled a need. In their hope for economic recovery and return to glory for the fatherland, the German people succumbed to the manipulative power of Hitler. During any other time in history, Hitler probably would have been ignored. But at this time and in this place, because others were weak and Hitler had tremendous strength of will and an ability to communicate, he rose out of the gutter to become Germany's dictator. How special was he? Taylor portrays him as a traditional politician who blundered into war with France and England. In principle and doctrine, Hitler was no more wicked and immoral than many other politicians of his day. Furthermore, Hitler made no plans for expansion or world domination. He simply made threats, which was his nature, and waited for others to provide opportunities. In the face of strength, he would retreat. In the face of weakness, he would advance. Now let's talk about the Versailles Treaty as a cause of World War II. At the close of World War II, the Kaiser fled Germany and the Weimar Republic was established. But the new government was swamped with problems. Still reeling from the wartime blockade, the German people had no food or fuel. They also were tremendously angered and humiliated by the treaty that was forced on them by the Allies. Although President Wilson had recommended a treaty that would establish a just and lasting peace, the Allies wanted something else: revenge. They were looking to destroy Germany and make it pay war damages, reparations. Given the poverty and widespread destruction within Germany, this was like mining for gold in a garbage heap. The resentment felt by the German citizens regarding the provisions of the Versailles Treaty worked against any permanent peace. This was clear when Hitler eventually defeated France. He had the railroad car in which Germany had surrendered after World War I brought to the same place, and there he had the French surrender. It was the most triumphant moment in Hitler's life. The provisions of the Versailles Treaty were harsh. Germany had to accept full responsibility for having started World War I. It had to agree to disarm, keep its armed forces limited, and demilitarize the Rhineland. It was stripped of its colonies, coal fields, and the mineral-rich area of Alsace and Lorraine. It was saddled with the staggering debt, $33 billion for war damages, at a time when Germans were starving and out of work. The treaty made Germans bitter. Specifically, Germany fought the Second World War to destroy the settlement of the First. A third cause of the war we can discuss is American isolationism and European hesitation. After World War I, the American attitude of isolationism, staying out of European affairs, was understandable. We had no land in Europe. A huge ocean separated us. We were disappointed about the results of World War I. It didn't bring real peace, disarmament, and democracy. There were pacifists in our country who were against all war, period. We were very much focused on our own internal problems due to the Great Depression. Although President Wilson wanted us to join the League of Nations, similar to the United Nations today, we did not want to join because we were sick of foreign entanglements. Finally, and very importantly, it was profitable for gun dealers in the United States to sell munitions abroad to many countries. Why take sides when you can make money helping both sides? The problem with our isolationist policies was that they ruined all efforts to make collective security, everyone cooperating to keep Germany at peace, a reality. The United States did not believe that a defeated Germany posed any threat to the peace and stability of Europe. The U.S. treated Germany as an equal in world affairs and thus ensured Germany's recovery. The problem of German weakness became the problem of German strength. With Europe left dealt with the German problem, the crux of the matter was that Britain and France were not of the same mind. Britain was much more friendly and conciliatory toward Germany because it valued Germany as a trading partner. France hated Germany and wanted to punish it. It wanted Germany to pay its war debts so that France could rebuild. Ironically, in the years between the wars, France did little to improve the offensive capability of its armed forces, despite the fact that it mistrusted German intentions. Instead, it relied on an outdated line of trenches known as the Maginot Line. This gave France false confidence. Another possible cause of the war was the cycle of aggression and appeasement. Violating the Versailles Treaty, which limited the German army to 100,000 men, Hitler began a massive rearmament program. Fighter planes, tanks, submarines, and so on. His goal? According to the book he had written in prison, entitled Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, Hitler wanted Germany to become a superpower capable of reconquering lost territory and being dominant in the world community. The free world would let it happen. Hitler's army entered the demilitarized Rhineland in 1936, and a firm reaction from France and Britain would have resulted in retreat, and Hitler might have fallen from power. Instead, Hitler bragged that only someone with his courage and guts could do such a thing. Next, Hitler annexed his native Austria. Prior to Nazi takeover, Hitler talked to the Austrian chancellor. He said to him, "As we are sitting here today, Germany has perhaps the strongest army in the world. Do you think we spent all this money to have a parading force, or do you think we will use this army?" The message was clear. Either allow the Nazis to take over, or there would be much bloodshed, and the end result would be the same. The chancellor resigned. Austria fell to the Germans overnight. The world stood by and watched. That cowardice was followed up by the loss of Czechoslovakia. First, Hitler spread propaganda that the German-speaking people in the Sudetenland, a province of Czechoslovakia, were being persecuted. England had a treaty with Czechoslovakia and told Hitler that there would be war if Hitler invaded. Hitler said, "I guess war cannot be avoided." In a last-ditch effort to keep the peace, England's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain asked for an audience with Hitler. Even Hitler was surprised by England's desperation. In Munich, the countries of Germany, France, and Britain met to discuss the fate of the Sudetenland. Hitler ranted and raved most of the morning about the history of Germany, and by the afternoon he had everything that he wanted: the right to go into the Sudetenland and an open invitation to take the rest of Czechoslovakia later. The Czechs sat all day in the hall in vain hope of an audience. Later, Hitler would say about this meeting, "Our enemies are worms. I saw them at Munich." At every turn, Hitler derided his generals for their lack of guts and audacity. In 1939, he stupefied the entire world when he signed a non-aggression treaty with Stalin and the Soviet Union. Now he could invade Poland without fear of starting a fight with the Soviets. Later that year, Hitler invaded from the west, and Stalin invaded from the east, and Poland ceased to exist as a state. This was the official beginning of World War II. As Hitler probed for weakness and moved ahead with his agenda, ailing leaders of Europe tried to appease him. That's giving the bully what he wants, and then he'll be satisfied. After the Munich conference, Chamberlain flew back to England, and at the airport held up a copy of the agreement. He said, "We have achieved peace in our times." How wrong he was.